This is Our Side of Addiction, the podcast. I'm Amanda Bork. Let's go. Okay, here we are. Hello. Good to see you. I am going to be talking about, what are we talking about? How to support someone that we love who has an addiction and they're refusing treatment. What do we actually do in those situations? More likely than not, your loved one with an addiction has been presented with the offer of recovery at some point, probably multiple times. And that doesn't even exclusively come from you. It also comes from other sources. And they refuse, which doesn't make any sense because you don't want them to be an addict anymore. And all you want is for them to get help. And they're saying no? Doesn't make any sense. Because they've cried to you, they've begged to you, they've told you they don't want to do this anymore. They need help. They want to go to rehab. And yet, when it's time, they refuse. Sometimes they'll even run away or disappear. Sometimes they'll disappear for years. What are we supposed to do in those situations? We feel vulnerable. We feel frustrated. We feel confused, disappointed, heartbroken, gutted. You might hear them say, okay, so they will ask for treatment, but then when the time comes, let's go through the door, they might say, I changed my mind. I don't need to go to treatment. I have it all under control. I was having a bad day when I said all of those things. I can stop whenever I want. I don't want your help. I don't need your help. My sister, Jen, I call her Jenna, she was an addict for over a decade. She used heroin and then she changed over to fentanyl, just the natural progression in this day. And she used to say, I was having a bad day. I changed my mind. Or her favorite one was, I already know everything they're going to say, like in rehab. I was like, obviously you don't. Or just we're not applying it. Like, you know everything. And she would also give herself this excuse. And she would say, I have a disease. I can't do anything about it. That was her justified excuse as to why her behaviors couldn't or weren't going to change. There was this constant back and forth with her about trying to get her into treatment. She would ask for help, and then we would organize the help, and she would refuse it. It got to a point where I got really, really frustrated and then became angry, and then I wanted to either physically harm her. I used to just fantasize about breaking her nose because I really hated her for what she was doing to herself and to us. But it was just this, or then, of course, forcing. How can I force her? Can we have her put on a psych hold? Can we plant drugs on her and call the cops and have her catch some kind of charges? How can we force it if she's not going to go willingly? And I think a lot of us are in the same situation where, what is it that we're supposed to do? You're asking us for help, or you obviously need desperate help, but then you're not doing it. what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to heal or think or even move through the day knowing that you're refusing? And it's confusing. How do they not realize what I'm realizing? How do they not see the severity of what's happening? Don't they care how this is impacting me? How sick I am all day long? Don't they think about that? Or do they not care about me? And if we just wait, obviously something bad is eventually going to happen. How long are we supposed to wait? How many times are we supposed to step aside and just accept the refusal? What if I accept it one too many times? What if I didn't push just a little bit harder and something happened to them? These are the thoughts and the guilt that have to sit within us during the experience of loving an addict. And it's really tough. And you know what? It's really shitty. Super shitty that we have to feel like this and experience this. Let's touch on why this refusal or maybe even denial is so common with addiction. And it's not that they're stubborn, they're lying, or anything like that. But addiction changes the brain. And there's evidence of that. You can look that up online. Brain scans of people, either people who don't have addiction or before addiction, during, and then during sobriety. There are changes in the brain that alter how a person behaves, thinks, and processes as well. Some things in particular include their assessment of risk. They are in a very high risk lifestyle, and for you, that might seem absolutely crazy. But for them, they're not processing the risk like you are. For them, it doesn't appear to be as risky as it actually is, or as you're perceiving it to be. Their long-term thinking is altered. They're not able to plot out long-term processing or long-term effects or impacts of things, or even long-term planning of life. They're emotionally unable to regulate, and they really do lack the insight, that personal awareness. They've had to ignore it to sustain their lifestyle, and now because of the changes in their brain, it's very difficult to have insight when you're in addiction. They're also trying to, okay, this is going to sound weird, but they're trying to preserve their addiction. Like, why would you want to do that? Don't they hate it? Isn't it miserable? Aren't they asking to get out of that? Yes, but two things can exist at once. And for them, a big part of how they get through the world, how they manage themselves, maybe even also their identity is wrapped up in being an addict and maintaining this lifestyle. So they grip onto it and they try their best to preserve it. Part of them, yes, is in denial too, because they can't actualize the reality of the situation. They really can't, because I feel strongly that if they did, they wouldn't be doing it. A part of them has to be in denial. There's a lot of shame. Fear is huge for them. A lot of fear. It's very scary getting sober. There's a very deep pain in getting sober, and that's physical pain as well as emotional and psychological pain for them. They know that they're going to have to face up to their lifestyle, their actions, but also what's deep within them that they're trying to mask with the addiction. What really is the root of this addiction? They're going to have to face that. And let's be honest, most people in this world have not faced their root issues. Most people can get by without doing it. However, an addict cannot. There's zero way around it. No matter what treatment option they go for, they have to address what's deep down within them, what that pain is. I mean, gosh, if that's optional, I wouldn't choose it either. We have to give them a little grace on that. And there's also some grief. Grief for their lifestyle, for what was, what could have been. There's a lot of grief in identity as well. Being presented with recovery can sometimes feel like a threat for them. And what we know is that when we're under a threat, our brain, it goes into survival mode. I just need to survive. For them, surviving would be maintaining their lifestyle, continuing what they already know. That's their comfort zone. For us, it's a war zone. Why would you sit in a war zone? For them, this is their familiar zone, and the brain is going to prioritize that familiar, especially during senses of threat. And it's really not that they don't care, but they're not able to face their addiction or process the addiction. For whatever reason, they're refusing, they're unable at this moment to do that. And that's required, and they know that, especially if it's a person who's gone through a couple of treatment centers or treatment stints. They know what they're going to face. And that might cause even a little bit more fear rather than a person who's never been to rehab or only been once. They're a little less understanding and suspecting. But someone who's skilled in rehabs, they know what's about to happen to them. So there's more fear built up in them. How do we not take that personally? As you heard in the beginning, I used to take that very personally with my sister, so much so that I wanted to physically harm her. I'll take you by the neck and shake you. This is our part of our journey, and part of our work is learning to not take it personally, or trying our best to remove as much of ourselves as we can. And I know, look, I see you through this phone, through this radio. You're rolling those dang eyes at me. That's crazy to say. That's my sibling, my spouse, my parent, my child. How could you possibly say to remove the personal aspect of it? Look, they're out there living their life, and you're allowed to live your life too. Yes, there's some overlap where my life influences yours, but just because there's an overlap doesn't mean I have to change. I'm not mandated to change. And it's hard to say and hard to hear as well. But we have to give people the space to live their lives, whether you agree with it or not. Whether it's going to eventually cause you the ultimate harm or not. Everyone's allowed to live their life and make choices for themselves. They're scared. They've got mixed feelings about going to rehab. I guarantee you, a big part of them does want to go. But they're afraid, or they're conflicted about it. Maybe they feel like you're controlling them. It could be a rebellion element there. Or they're going to be judged. They don't trust the recovery process. That could be. There are a wide array of treatment options. Most people only think about one, the 12 steps, which is our founding father of recovery. And it's great, but it does not work for everyone. And there's a lot of things in the 12 step that I don't agree with and I don't think work for most people. If your loved one has gone to a 12 step and it hasn't served them because maybe we don't understand all the options available, we might insist they go back to a 12 step. Obviously, you didn't get it right. You missed something in there. But it could be that it could be they're not genuinely putting in effort. Yes, I would always sway as that's the first option. However, it could also be that it doesn't align with them. The belief systems or the steps, maybe that just doesn't match them. It could also be they're feeling like change isn't possible. They're too far gone. They've passed that point of return, or there's no way they could rectify what they've done. Because if you're lucky enough to hear stories from addicts of things that they've done, if they trust you with that, it's horrific. It'll probably make you sick to your stomach hearing the things that they do in addiction. If you're a parent, even a spouse, I would suggest never even knowing their stories. Maybe hearing stories of other addicts that you're not tied to, because it'll turn your stomach for sure. The biggest thing for us to understand is that, yes, they want to stop, but they can't imagine stopping. And it's that polar opposite in their mind that tugs at them. And that's part of why you get mixed messaging. Because you hear those opposites. You hear, I want help, please help me. And then in the middle, you get the help and you present it. And then you hear the opposite. I don't need it. I was having a bad day. I'm fine. And you're like, what the actual fuck? Like, what is it? Which one is it? Because I'm doing all the busy work in the middle. But I'm hearing both of your sides. It's confusing for us, but it's also confusing and conflicting for them. It's not necessarily that they're refusing help. It's that they're really conflicted and bouncing between each parts. I will add right here, it's a great part to add, about the addiction cycle. I'll do another episode specifically on that. But what we can understand and apply right now to this conversation is that addiction runs in a cycle. The first 3 stages of addiction, they're mental, so you're never going to know they're going on. There's not going to be very much sign. If there is sign that something's happening, it's very easy to ignore it or to live in ignorance around that. After they've physically used, then we get to remorse. So they're having regret. They were triggered, they had these mental stages, triggered, used, and then they have remorse. I screwed up. I can't believe I did that. I was going to get into rehab. I said I was never going to use that again. They feel guilty. And it's when they're in this guilty state of the cycle that they reach out for help. Maybe they almost died, or they had some sort of scare, and now that's weighing on them. and they feel horrible and they're realizing, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this. That's the moment they reach out for help. And then, unfortunately, when they move back, because that's the last stage in the cycle, when they move back into the beginning of the cycle, restart it, and go into those 3 mental stages, we've passed our window of opportunity for getting them into rehab. The most pristine moment is going to be when they're in remorse. And the bad part about that is we can't always get someone help that same day, that same hour. That's the tricky part, because once they've moved out of that state and restarted into the cycle, they're not going to be willing to get help. We've got to wait till they spin back around to the remorse stage to catch them again. How can you possibly line that up with getting them help? It's challenging. And that's why every time you've seen on those addiction intervention shows, they have their intervention, they get them to agree to rehab, immediately get on a plane. Immediately, let's go right now. We've already got your stuff. You don't even get to go home and pack a bag. You're gone now. Because that's how swift it really needs to be. And you can even see, if you watch those shows, the person will agree to go into rehab, get some treatment, and then they're like, great, we love you. They say goodbye. Here are your bags. Put them in a car. And they're in the car 5 minutes later, and they're trying to get out of it. They're saying, oh, I just need to go back home really quickly for something. Or I want to say goodbye to my dog. Or that's what they start weaseling out of it. Not even 5 minutes later. That's the part about addiction and getting them into treatment that's so fickle and extremely frustrating, because it has to be so swift. But sometimes it's just a matter of missing our window within this cycle of addiction. And if we can identify each part of the addiction cycle, then we can gauge when they're going to be in that remorse stage, and we can anticipate it a little bit. That's one of the assets of learning about the addiction cycle and learning about how your addict looks in each stage. I will say, there's not a timeline on the cycle. Someone could sit at the first stage, the mental obsession stage, which is number 1 in the addiction cycle. They could stay there for decades. And you think they're no longer an addict, but they're actively an addict in their head. They just haven't moved past that first stage. Or they could run through that cycle, every single stage, in 5 minutes. It's partly difficult because there's no timeline, and some people are slow to go through it. Some people are rapid. Some stages they're slow. Other stages are really fast for them. If we can recognize our addict's pattern, if there is a pattern, try to suss it out and see what it is. That's going to be our greatest asset in the conversation around treatment. Why pushing our addicts into recovery often backfires? Why? I'll tell you why it's bad. If you've ever been around a 2-year-old and you've seen them throw a temper tantrum, you told them no, or you told them go take a nap, or buckle your seatbelt, or car seat, whatever that thing is, they throw a fit. I have seen, I don't have kids, but I have seen some fits in the grocery stores. Oh my God, that is crazy. They don't want to be told anything. They're starting to assert their autonomy. They're starting to realize, I'm an individual. I get to do what I want. I want to do this. And they're starting to practice and implement that. It just keeps expanding the older we get. I certainly do not want to be told anything. Well, I mean, you got to catch me and you got to deliver it in a nice way to get me to do something. You got to be smooth about it. I got to feel like I also want to do it. But if someone were to come in and start pointing a finger and dictating to you, you're going to go over here and then you're going to go and do this and you don't have an option, how would you feel? I don't care what the state of my life is. Don't come in and try to rearrange. Who asked you to do that? Love me or hate me, no one asked you to come in and be a dictator in my life. That's not love. That's coming from a place of fear. And we can't help but move like that as loved ones. We walk around with the thought of you dying every single day. Of course we're petrified and highly anxious and moving from a state of fear, which I get, but it's not going to be received very well. We're going to be lecturing. We're going to be given ultimatums, maybe threatening them. We're going to be appealing to them emotionally, maybe begging and pleading and crying, and you don't know what you do to me, which is true, but all we're doing is trying to manipulate the situation through emotion. And we're going to have really good logical arguments. We're going to be debating with them. It's all rooted in fear, and it comes across like that too. No one wants to receive any kind of dictation or orders in that context by being delivered through fear. No one. Not even your spouse can come in and start giving you ultimatums. You would pack your bags and go to a hotel that night. Who the hell do you think you are? And I give these examples because I want us to fully understand how they receive it on their end. And part of why they're refusing could very well feed into how it's being delivered or presented to them. The more we pressure, the more we present through a space of fear, the more likely there's going to be resistance. And it's like, oh, just because you saying it like that, now I'm not going to do it. I was going to do it, but just because you said it like that, presented it like that, you can go take a walk with that. It's part of it. They already feel ashamed. They already feel as though they're out of control. And the way we're presenting makes the situation worse. They feel like coerced into it or pushed into it. And this makes people defiant. They feel like their autonomy is being threatened, which is very fair because we wouldn't accept behavior like that from others. Yet we're dishing it out to our loved ones. This is also not to say that we're supposed to be quiet. Okay, then I'll say nothing. I'm just going to watch them die. No, I'm not saying that either. But it's very important how things are presented and when they're presented and where we are coming from when we are presenting it. It's vital in proper communication and really being able to get through to them. That's going to be an asset. Okay, Amanda, if the way I'm presenting is so important, how am I supposed to do it then? I'm so glad you asked. Let's touch on motivational interviewing. It's mostly used in guess it was developed in the 80s, and it's very heavily used in counseling types of settings. It's a way to help move people toward change. We aren't using coercion. We aren't trying to manipulate. We aren't forcing, but we want to understand them, what they are looking for, what they need, and helping to bring that to the surface for them and supporting that element. It only works in a non-judgmental environment, and an environment that also includes empathy and some level of partnership or assistance. There's a curiosity rather than a confrontation. We are open and willing to collaborate rather than control. And this helps to invoke their reasons for change, not yours. You don't want them to die. We are making it about us. Instead, we want to invoke their reasons. Why do they want it? Why do they think they need to go to rehab? Some ways we can start utilizing this strategy are open-ended questions. And not every question is going to be the best for every situation. If you don't think you're able to handle the truth of a response, don't ask the question. What do you like about using? What worries you about using or your addiction? What do you imagine your life could look like if things were better? Those are some examples. You want to try to get their side of it. Try to understand their perspective of it. That's going to be an asset for us. Because once we see their side, then we can talk to them in the ways that they need to be spoken to. We can appease to that part. We want to make sure we're reflective and actively listening. That can be a challenge because what they say is not going to be what you want to hear. If they're willing to tell you the truth, you're not going to want to hear it. A part of you might reject what they're saying or skew it. You might hear what you want to hear. But we have to recenter ourselves in those moments and really try to get into their head and their heart. Instead of having them appease to us, we're appeasing to them. Maybe saying something like, it sounds like you do want to change, but you don't as well. Is it fear that's the don't? Is it uncomfortable part of the don't? Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Am I understanding that correctly? And we also want to make sure that we're affirming their individuality, their autonomy. This is your decision. I also want to add that your decisions affect me. I'm influenced by your lifestyle. I wish I wasn't, but how you live your life has an impact on me. And we don't have to get into it. You're breaking my heart. You're making me sick to my stomach. I can't sleep because of all of this. While all of those things are true, it's not the moment to express them. Because then we're offloading and making it about us again. Which I understand the tendency, but in this context with this strategy, that doesn't work. We are making it about them. This isn't guaranteed. It's not going to work, and not necessarily we'll all be skilled at doing this. Sometimes we're too wrapped up in our emotions, our head, to offer this type of interaction, which is fine. Can we get a mediator in there? Can we get a neutral person in here? They might be able to help. You could always seek professional help if they're willing to go with you. Sometimes it's better to have someone known to the family to come in and mediate a little bit. Depends what your addict is willing to do. But research motivational interviewing and start practicing some of these skills. You can practice on your friends or your spouses, or practice in the mirror with yourself if you don't have anyone, which is fine. And start running through a little bit of practice. What if I'm trying all of these things and I'm still not getting any results? What if they still refuse? That's okay. We can be supportive whether they get into treatment or not. And that's important to maintain stability in this and not get upset or kind of throw in our hat, throw in the towel is the expression. Because maybe they're just not getting into treatment right now. They could very well go in next month or next year. We want to maintain the support and maintain openness with them as best as possible so that we can level up our skills, our understanding, maybe start trying to catch the addiction cycle, and that when it swings back around, we can be a little bit better or a little bit more supportive, a little more skilled. Doesn't mean that we're pretending everything is fine or pretending like it's not devastating, but we can be honest and open with them without attacking them. We can set limits with them without feeling like we're punishing them or believing it's a punishment. Oh, you're not getting into rehab? Well, then I'm going to do this. Not as a punishment. We want to make sure it's not coming from bitterness or resentfulness. Natural consequences are good. And you'll see that in the intervention shows. If you refuse treatment, what's the consequence? You're no longer welcome in my home. You can no longer work with me. I will need to leave the relationship, whatever it is. And the difference is these are calm, level, and they aren't being used as punishment. They're being used as repercussions or consequences. And let's just outline, because this gets blurry for us, that line of supportive versus assistant to addiction. We are not being supportive when we are covering their consequences. That's being an assistant to addiction. When we're lying to protect them, you're assisting addiction. When we are absorbing all of the fallout, I think that ties into covering consequences a little bit. That's being assistant to addiction. Also, when we're putting our life on hold indefinitely, because who knows when they're going to agree to rehab, if they ever are, who knows when this situation is going to get better, that's being an assistant to addiction. We're becoming a subservient to addiction by putting off our life, for sacrificing our life. We want to make sure we're clear, but also compassionate. And that can be a struggle, because there's going to be a big part of you that doesn't want to be compassionate or doesn't have it anymore. We want to make sure we're setting boundaries around refusal. And that can be hard. We aren't forcing them. And I think this is a very thin line where it can get a little bit difficult to decipher what end is on where. However, boundaries are not about forcing treatment. It's about deciding what we are willing and unwilling to accept, what we are willing and unwilling to participate in. If you are using, I am no longer able to financially support you in any way. If you're intoxicated, I am unable to engage in conversation with you. If you are actively using, I am unable to have you in my home. We have to make sure that we're clear on those for ourselves, and also we are upholding our boundaries. Because as you know, boundaries are absolutely nothing if we aren't enforcing them. Imagine, we have speed limits, we have cops, but the cop never takes action. There's 0 tickets, 0 cars getting pulled over for speeding. They just let everyone speed. What would happen? It wouldn't take very long before everyone understood that, there's a speed limit sign, but the cops don't ever do anything about it. So we can just speed. And it's the same when we don't actually enforce our boundaries. People catch on very quickly that either you always letting them off with a warning and never giving them a ticket ever, or you don't even pull them over to begin with. People catch on and then they realize, I can do whatever I want. Boundaries help the family unit have a little bit of perspective. They help to reduce chaos. They stop enabling patterns. We really don't want to be an enabler, and boundaries help us and our interactions with others. They clarify responsibilities. Whose job is what? And how consistent are we at our jobs? They also protect your nervous system so that you can feel calmer. You can reduce your anxiety. You can re-regulate your sleep. And boundaries aren't going to make somebody get help just because you say, if you're using, you can't live in my house. Or if you refuse treatment, you can no longer live in my house. Basically the same, but could be different. That doesn't mean they're going to go and get help. Most addicts would be very happy to leave and continue their lifestyle. And that's like a pain point that we have to manage on our own. Oh, but they're in the street. I don't want them getting high in some abandoned building. And what if they overdose and die and we never find them, and it's better if they get high in my house so I can see them and find them if something happens. Some people might think like that, and I understand where that comes from. But when we behave like that, we are the assistant to addiction. We are making life easier for them. We are sustaining the addiction. I cannot say that enough. The more because it's so confusing because we think we're being helpful. Like, that sounds legit. I don't want my loved one dying in an abandoned building and never finding them. Legitimate. However, in the reality of addiction, we are making addiction stronger and better and more comfortable. And we can justify these actions. Yes, that's justified. Not wanting our loved one to just be lost and never found. But the more we become the assistant to addiction, the more we make that easier, the more it persists. And I could talk at length about that. Both personally, I had that personal experience with my sister and a family member being the assistant to her addiction, really helping her keep her secrets, maintain her lifestyle, get cars when she would crash them, give her money, like really was the assistant to addiction. And also professionally with clients that I work with, and also at the rehab where I facilitate meetings. It's just the reality of it. We have to make sure we're having these boundaries and enforcing these boundaries even when it feels devastating. Because easing our discomfort is not how we're going to be able to attack or successfully manage addiction. It directly impacts us, but it's not about us. And when we're assisting, we're making it about us. When are we supposed to step back? Because this is necessary, and it's going to be different and unique for each individual. Some people are willing to do things, other people are not. And we have to decide for ourselves where we land and how we're going to behave. But some things to take into consideration. If your safety is at risk, and I would actually include other people's safety as well, because if it's a fact of an addict in the house, well, who else is in that house? Are there children in there? Are there other adults? Are there grandparents in there that could also be in danger? So are we putting ourselves or others in danger? But like I said, that person who was the assistant for my sister, they would get her cars. She would get high on heroin or fentanyl. She would nod out and crash cars. And they would get her back into new cars. And they knew she was using heroin or fentanyl. They knew it. How disgusting is that? That's putting other people's life in danger. In what ways are we behaving like that? Are we putting strangers in danger? Another question we can ask ourselves about, is it time to step back? How's my mental health? Are you suffering mental-wise? Is it deteriorating? Are you having mental health issues resurface or establish? That's a big signal that you're unbalanced and you're overextended, and it's not healthy, and it's also not sustainable. Are your boundaries being repeatedly violated? And I think this particularly is related to our addicts, but are they consistently violating your boundaries? That could be on your end where you didn't uphold them or you're not communicating effectively about them. Because if you're not clear, they're not clear. First step would be to analyze your side of it. But if you're sure that your end is being upheld and they're continuously violating it, that's a moment to step back. You're too invested. There's a reason why people keep violating your boundaries. Also, are you emotionally depleted? Like, you got nothing left in me, or you're running pretty low on that, getting frustrated, getting upset, feeling resentful. Maybe you're overwhelmed with these emotions you have in regard to your loved one, and that can ruin your life. It can ruin your career, ruin your relationships, your friendships. A lot can go down really quickly too with that. We aren't abandoning our loved one. It feels like that. They're sick and ill. They need to be sheltered and saved. And I'm directing all of this attention on myself, or I'm stepping back. You're responsible for yourself and your well-being, and you have to prioritize that no matter what's going on around you. Because we all know addiction is lifelong. Addiction is not something we're sacrificing ourselves for 3 months, 6 months. It's years and years and years, decades of the runaround. Sacrificing ourselves for decades, you're not going to be able to sustain it. I think you can do it for a year, maybe 2. But after that, there's going to be some serious implications for you. We have to recognize where our limits are, and also within that, where our responsibilities are. Yes, we have a responsibility to the relationship. Yes, I know that you do, absolutely. However, you are not responsible for their life or their recovery. It feels as though it's your entire mission to get them into recovery, but it's not. You can support that. You can do your side of that, but you can only do what's your side. Their side is more than 50%. I'd say their side is at least 90%. It has to come from their side. And you can't exchange and you can't overstep. They have to want it because they're the ones that are going to have to do the work. Say I want to lose weight. I can't recruit you to go and do that for me. Yes, you can cheer me on. Yes, you can clap for me. You can go to the gym with me. We can share a meal plan service. But I'm the one who has to put all the effort in. And it's the same with addiction. All the effort has to come from the addict. So all of the responsibility has to come from the addict. Let's look at some barriers and maybe a little bit of misconception. If I stop trying, I'm giving up on them. If I stop pushing and coercing and forcing, it means I'm giving up. I'm giving up on them, on love, on our relationship. It's just not the truth of it. It feels like that. Your mind might play tricks on you and tell you that, convince you that's truth. But like I said, we have to empower other people to make choices for themselves and take action for themselves. If 90% at minimum is coming from them, how do you actually think that 10% is going to stop them or means that you're abandoning them? If I don't push them, they'll never change. Some people do need a lot of motivation. Yes. Like some people receive the cheer, the encouragement very well, and they love it. They need it. They thrive on it. Other people don't. But the push, the ultimate push, it's never going to come from the outside. And it's also not your responsibility. Going back to that example, if you don't cheer me on to go to the gym, does that mean I'll never change? I'll never lose the weight because you didn't cheer me on? You didn't go to the gym with me, and that means I will never change? Sounds like you're trying to take responsibility, but also trying to take my glory. You can look at it in that perspective as well. It's not coming from you. It's coming from me. It's mine. Another one would be, they'll think that I don't care. If I pull back, they will think that I don't care. Or maybe also within that, the relationship will dissolve. You'll find with addicts, your relationship is very much one-sided. It's all the effort is coming from you, and they put in almost no effort at all. And it could be that you think if you pull back, I won't have a relationship with them. I'll lose touch with them. They'll think that I don't love them anymore. When someone is in addiction, they are not their normal or usual self. They're taking on the identity of an addict, behaving, thinking, moving like an addict. Separating these two is a little bit helpful for us because that is a big conflict internally, having this catalog of our loved one in our brain, in our hearts, and then that conflicts with the addict. It doesn't make sense. They're not the same person. And it's hard for us to realize that this person that we know and love is not the same. Separating these two helps us process that experience a little bit better so that we can gain a little more insight, but also not take so many things personally, because we can understand that this is not my loved one. This is the addict. And this is going to hurt a little bit, but I'm going to say it anyways because that's what I'm here for. They're not concerned with you right now. There's no space for them to be. They have zero capacity to be concerned with you. And that hurts because you are obsessed with them and you can't think or move or do anything without them in your head. But they are not thinking about you like that. They're not concerned about you. They don't feel like you've abandoned them. They don't think like that. They're obsessed. They've been wrapped up into an addict, and all they care about is getting high and sustaining their lifestyle. They will hurt anyone necessary to maintain that lifestyle. And you know that because they've hurt you in a variety of ways. They're willing to steal from their grandmothers to get high. They're not concerned that your feelings are hurt. They're doing whatever they need to do to sustain their addiction. We can't really get through to them as you might normally get through to your loved one because they've assumed that identity. Trust me, when it all shakes out, fingers crossed, your loved one gets into recovery, gets sober, and has that clarity, transformation. You will then be able to come back and have conversations and make resolve on a lot of these issues. And that's one of the things you can bring up with them. But right now, there's zero clarity on their end, and it's not something you can have a conversation about. And the next misconception, barrier, I should be able to handle this. Yeah, I'm the strong one. I'm the tough one. I'm the family pillar, if you will. I should be able to handle or manage or deal with this. We can't do it alone. And if you were meant to do it on your own, there wouldn't be this massive industry focused on addiction recovery. If you were supposed to solve it or resolve it, if you could, there wouldn't be all these businesses and treatment programs and groups and meetings and support systems. It wouldn't be necessary. It's not for you to fix or resolve or figure out. It's also not for you to bear all alone. It's not possible. It's not fair to ask that of people. It's certainly not fair to assume that of people either. Let's switch over to emotions, because that's going to peak. When we love an addict and they refuse treatment, it could feel very unsettling, nerve-wracking, uncertainty is there. We might feel chronically anxious because we're anticipating the worst. We could have some anger at the situation. Maybe you want to punch their nose too. You want to break their nose and see some blood too. You're angry. You should be angry. You're allowed to be angry. Don't punch anybody. But what I'm saying is, if you have those sentiments, that's okay. Maybe you feel guilty. You might even feel guilty for wanting distance, for asserting boundaries, for taking space for yourself. Could be a lot of guilt around that. You could also be ashamed for distancing or for not understanding how to help them or what to say or how to get them into rehab. You might feel ashamed about that. I used to tell myself all the time I was a bad sister because I couldn't fix it. And I felt shame. Like a good sister, she would be able to figure it out. She would know what to say. And that was, of course, guilt, but a lot of shame because I wasn't good. And you might feel like that too. In addition to that, we might feel frozen or disassociate and numb. I know many people who have a loved one with an addiction, and the experience is so overwhelming that they start using substances themselves. I heard one really tragic story. Forget where I heard it, but it was a sister I think the older sister had an addiction. She ended up overdosing and dying. The younger sister, she just couldn't manage it. She ended up using, I believe it was heroin. She started also using heroin to cope with the death and became addicted herself. It's just, oh my God, it's horrible. It's so tragic. But sometimes we freeze or we disassociate, and we also might try to numb. There's this element of grief and loss because you love someone who you can see physically. They're here, but they're not the same person. They're not emotionally available. Their personality has changed. The way they speak has changed. And that can feel like an element of grief and loss. It's also exhausting. It's confusing. It riles up a lot of emotions in us. Ultimately, what you can't control is whether or not they're ready, whether or not they go into recovery, and you also can't control whether or not they experience consequence. They should be feeling consequences of their actions. They should be feeling pain for the things that they do. I will always advocate for giving them the worst experience possible in addiction, because most families want to do the opposite of that, which is counterproductive when we're trying to confront addiction. What can you control? What can we do in these situations? We can speak honestly but compassionately. We can set boundaries. We can care for ourselves. We can seek support. And we can also ensure that we're doing some reflection and staying rooted in reality. We often like to live in denial or be very choosy on what we accept as real and not. So we can reject the uncomfortable things, the things we don't want to face. We want to start practicing being rooted in reality and doing that reflection. Making sure that we're letting go of this false ideation that we're supposed to control them or we have to control them. Let's wrap this up, put a bow on it. Boom, put a name tag on it. Supporting someone who's refusing treatment is going to be devastating and confusing. Your head's going to spin. You're going to get frustrated. What's being asked of us in these situations is that we're patient. We're courageous. We build up some sort of tolerance. And we also show ourselves respect. We can be loving of them and also be angry at them. We can step back and we can allow ourselves to recenter and allow ourselves to live our lives at the same time that they choose to do what they want to do with their lives. And just because someone's refusing treatment doesn't mean that's the end. That cycle of addiction, it's going to loop back around to remorse, and they will be reaching out again. Or you'll see signs that they need help again. And listen, that's all I got for you today. And this episode, thanks for listening. I love that you're here with me. I love that we share this space. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.